Hello everyone, Alec Alger the SideQuest Gamer here. Never have I seen so much hate go into a pretty decent entry in a series. Well, except for these. Why does this particular entry get so much hate among fans? Anyways, let's delve into Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link and take a look at it. See why it gets so much hate. And why so many people defend it.
I know I'm just preaching to the choir, but the original Legend of Zelda for the NES was such a monument in gaming. It was a top-down adventure game that played out the way you wanted it to play out. So you could go in any dungeon you wanted, provided you had the tools necessary to do so. But the first 3 dungeons, I believe, are accessible at the start of the game. But rather than have a very linear adventure like Super Mario Bros., you had a non-linear adventure game where the decisions you made and exploration will help you out in the long run. Now, with an innovative game like this, you would think it would either require a password or you had to beat it in one sitting. And I would say no to both, since according to the Guinness Book of World Records, this was the first console game to use a save system in 1986. This game was so successful, and with the success of the first game, you would think Nintendo, who developed the game, would make a sequel.
And so they did. And it was different. Very different.
Now, I don't mind change. In fact, I do like it sometimes, but a lot of people do not like change because they were so much in love with the original that any form of change would be unnecessary to them. And because the game was absolutely nothing like the original other than the protagonist being Link and some of the enemies returning, there's so many things that changed that upset many fans of the original game.
It's not like The Legend of Zelda had an established gameplay formula yet. I mean, most of the hate comes from the people who've played the many sequels in the Zelda franchise. Why does it get so much hate? I mean, Jak 2 was completely different than the first game, but people love that even more than the original sometimes. I mean, there are people who prefer the original Jak and Daxter. Another good example would be ToeJam and Earl Panic and Funkatron for the Sega Genesis. That was completely different than its predecessor, but people loved that more than the first one. Well, some people did. And remember the original Wonder Boy? Well, its sequels are vastly different, but when people who own a Master System look back on the Wonder Boy series, they fondly remember 2 and 3, which were different than the original. But why does Zelda 2 get so much hate for being different when Jak 2, ToeJam and Earl 2, and Wonder Boy 2 were completely different? Why are those the exception to the rule? Well, let's delve in further to Zelda 2's flaws.
If you can't tell by the footage, the most drastic change to Zelda 2 was the gameplay, because the original was a top-down, non-linear sword-in-hand go-have-some-fun adventure, while Zelda 2 is 90% action side-scroller, 10% top-down adventure. When in the top-down perspective, it's only as a means to go from one place to another, but when black shapes appear and touch Link, then you go into the side-scrolling mode to battle the ambushing enemies. However, to avoid them, go on the yellow path, which I like to call the yellow brick road. The dungeons in Zelda 2 are also side-scrollers, and the different areas of the dungeons are connected by various elevators. While there are a total of 9 dungeons in the original Zelda, there's only 7 in Zelda 2, and even though it seems like less, some of these dungeons you have to invest hours into. And while the original one had maps and compasses to help you navigate the dungeon, Zelda 2 does not. Now, there's actually a rumor that says that if you beat the dungeon, it will collapse even if you didn't collect the treasure inside, making the rest of the game unplayable. But on my first playthrough, that never happened. If you didn't get the dungeon's treasure, it will stay up until you get it, even if you already killed the boss. The gameplay is not only different in the side-scrolling aspect, but also Link now goes by a traditional experience point system for leveling up his health, magic, or attack damage levels. You can get these points from killing enemies, and sometimes they'll leave P-bags, that's not funny, to boost your needed experience by 50, 100, or even 200. Now also, I should warn you that you only have 3 lives, so if you get a game over, the collected experience will drop to 0, so be sure not to be reckless during grinding for points. At least you get to keep the acquired new stat levels. Now, despite the major success of the original Zelda, Miyamoto wanted Zelda 2 to be completely different from the original to add more variety to the new series. Now, Zelda 2 does keep the save system previously introduced in the original Zelda, but the thing about the continue system here is that if you died in a dungeon in the original Zelda, you had the option to continue from the dungeon entrance with your acquired items, but if you died in a dungeon in Zelda 2, you have to start all the way back at Princess Zelda's chamber and have to journey all the way back to the dungeon where you left off in, unless you're playing the final dungeon.
That since renting games in Japan was illegal, that the Japanese version of Zelda 2 is a lot easier than the North American version. That way, North Americans won't rent the game and then just beat it and then never play it again. They would have to buy the whole game in order to have enough time to beat it. Now, I could be wrong, but I did hear that in the Japanese version of Zelda 2, if you died in a dungeon, you could start at the beginning of it with your acquired items. But I'm not too sure. I heard it's just a rumor. But like I said, they made the North American version harder so it wouldn't be beaten in one sitting. Unless you're a speedrunner, this game cannot be beaten in a mere weekend. In fact, you want to know how long it took me to beat this game? 3 weeks. Non-stop, no other games played. 3 weeks. And this was during summer vacation when I did have time to play it.
Zelda 2 is known by fans as the hardest in the series, especially Death Mountain, but it wasn't too hard if you knew what to do. Keep falling in the lava, get a spell that turns you into a fairy and fly your way across. Too many enemies on screen? Use magic to boost your armor, and you'll get even more sword abilities that you would only otherwise see in the later Super Smash Bros. Games, like the downward stab. So this game may actually be the hardest in the series, and some of the enemy placement was very cheap sometimes, but I never got so frustrated I wanted to quit the game, and it really doesn't take that much for me to want to rage quit a game. So that should tell you something about the difficulty. And also, the coolest new addition to Zelda 2 that really helped evolve the Zelda series is introducing NPCs and Towns.
Now, I know some of you will be like, but SideQuest Gamer, wasn't the old man and old woman, don't they count as NPCs? Zero credibility, unsubscribed. But let me tell you, the old man and the old woman in the first game that you encountered in dungeons and caves and stuff, those wouldn't really count as NPCs since they only reacted when you entered the room rather than press a button. Those are really just immobile screens with characters drawn into them. And a lot of them give you the same dialogue over and over, unless in the old woman's case you had a note. And of course the various Gorias scattered throughout Hyrule. But really, those don't count as NPCs. At least not like the ones in Zelda 2 and in the later entries of the Zelda series.
Now what I mean is that Zelda 2 is the first Zelda to use mobile active NPCs that talk to you at the press of a button, which was a feature used in later Zelda games. One notable NPC is the internet meme-worthy Error, who actually helps you out once later in the game. But a lot of people just like to point out that his name is Error. They don't explain his purpose in the game, but he does help you out in like a side quest. The most important NPCs in the game are the wizards that give you new magic abilities that will help you out big time when you're going into a new dungeon. Now, the only drawback of Zelda 2 is the difficulty curve, which alone is a reason for people to hate this game. I didn't mind it, but when going in that mountain labyrinth with the many lava pits, the game got really hard really fast. But as soon as I left that mountain, the difficulty was still hard, but not that unpredictable like it was in that mountain labyrinth. Seriously, you'll never meet a person who played Zelda 2 who didn't hate Death Mountain. Now, I don't have a problem with a hard game, but I would prefer if it had a steady difficulty curve where the game got only harder as you became more powerful. Not throwing an insane difficulty whenever after the game was just starting, but that's for just one portion of the game. A portion you'll likely spend hours upon trying to navigate that cursed mountain.
All that negativity, and I didn't even touch upon the story.
Basically, after Link killed the evil wizard Ganon in the first game, Ganon's minions try to revive him, but like the return of Dracula in the Hammer movies, the only way to do that is to use the blood of the murderer to revive their slain master.
So basically, they're trying to kill Link while he has problems of his own to deal with.
Meanwhile, Link is tasked by Impa to awaken the ancient Princess Zelda from her 100-year slumber. And no, she's not the same Zelda you rescued from the first game. This is her ancestor. Or is it? I don't know. The reason why this particular Princess Zelda is asleep for hundreds of years was because hundreds of years ago, this Princess Zelda had the secret of the Triforce of Wisdom, and her brother wanted to interrogate her with the aid of the wizard, but the wizard cast a sleeping spell on the princess, leaving her in stasis for all this time, but also led to the wizard's own demise, and the prince, as a result, declared all princesses be named Zelda. So flash forward to Zelda 2, where Link has acquired the Triforce of Wisdom and Power from the first game, but the Triforce of Courage is still hidden, so Impa gave him the 6 jewels he can only insert at the statues at the end of each of the 6 temples/dungeons, so he can unlock the gate to the final palace containing the Triforce of Courage guarded by Link's shadow for some reason. I guess it's a face your deepest fear, which is actually your self-fantasy trope, in order to prove yourself worthy or something.
No, that's all there really is to the story. Nothing Shakespearean or anything. And most of the story you'd only get from the manual itself and the little intros text scroll in the beginning of the game. As for what happens if Link combines the Triforce of Courage with Wisdom and Power, well, that's for you to find out. I'm not going to spoil the ending for you. Of course, you could just look it up on YouTube, but you wouldn't do that. You're true gamers. Are you?
Now, as to why people hate this game so much, it's different and it's difficult. People didn't mind Super Mario Bros. 2 because although it was different, it wasn't any more difficult than the original game. But my main gripes with Zelda 2 are the unpredictable difficulty curve, and I also have to mention that there's not as much exploring as there was in the first game. In fact, going back to play this game a second time, it just felt like a linear experience, even though technically it was non-linear, but there weren't any item shops, no hidden areas except for New Kazuto. The on-map items are only like one-purpose items, and really, on your first playthrough, you've found pretty much everything in the game. So, unlike the first game that has an infinite replayability, Zelda 2 is kind of like a one-and-done game, meaning it's a great time the first time, but there's really no reason to play it again except if you're either a speedrunner or just to see if you still have what it takes to beat the hardest game in the series, or maybe for just nostalgia reasons. So overall, I would give this game a 78 out of 100. I would say it deserves at least one playthrough and well worthy of the $5 price on the Wii U eShop. I liked it for what it is, and to truly enjoy what the game has in store, you have to treat this game as its own game and praise it for what it brought to the table, not for how it is as a sequel to the original Zelda. Like NPCs, and the town's names are the names of the 7 sages in Zelda Ocarina of Time. Just saying. And also, this game was the first to use a magic meter, which was later used in A Link to the Past and other later entries in the series. So there's really a lot to enjoy about Zelda 2. Be sure to give this game a try sometime. Emulate it, get it on the Wii U eShop. You might like it, you might not. Don't play it just because popular opinion says it's the worst Zelda game ever. Seriously, have they played Spirit Tracks? But seriously, give this game a try. You won't regret it. But if you won't take my word for it, let's see what Andrew Starkey has to say.
Yeah, Zelda 2 was a fun game. I did not like how many monsters there were, but all in all, the game was fun. I never understood that woman that takes you into the house, though.
Thank you so much for watching this video. But please give me your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you love Zelda 2? Do you hate it? Do you think it's okay? Do you think it's not as bad as everyone says it is, but it's nothing masterfully crafted? Please tell me your thoughts in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, remember to stay awesome.